Today's video features a paid partnership with Shortform, but more on them later. The self-help genre, one of the most crowded genre spaces out there. It can be really overwhelming when you want to benefit your life but don't entirely know how you want to better your life, and you don't know which books will benefit you. My goodness, where do we even begin? I used to be a bookseller, and one of my sections that I managed was the self-help section. I ordered the books for it along with philosophy. However, I'm also a former ghostwriter of self-help literature. That's right, when I first started my freelance career back in 2018, I worked in the self-help industry. I wrote one physical book and I wrote ebooks and pamphlets and articles in the self-help genre for clients. So I know this area incredibly well. And I also know it can actually be really overwhelming for someone, particularly when you really want to improve your life. You know the answers are in books, and there's a wealth of videos on YouTube, like the one you're watching now, of people recommending the books that changed their lives. And from my perspective, there are some classics that pop up time and time again that for me didn't work at all. Perhaps it is because I am neurodivergent. As interesting as they were, I enjoyed them, but potentially because I am very neurodiverse, they didn't really slot into my life. Whereas the ones that I want to recommend to you today are from a neurodivergent perspective. They are books that didn't really give me any formal guidance. They were books that you could read and take what you wanted from them. They weren't telling you how to live your life or perform in a certain way or how to do this and how to do that. Because here's my little wee rant. A lot of self-help books out there are written by people who are very neurotypical, which is fantastic, but also their rules don't apply. There are also many other differences that I find don't relate to me. They are normally written by people without chronic health conditions that they have to apply for, and also people potentially not from lower income households. You know, when you start off your book saying, oh, I lost my first million, but 5 years later I gained 10 million back, not really in the same realm as someone working minimum wage. So these are the books that I would recommend to anyone who is neurodiverse in any particular way, whether you're autistic or ADHD or dyslexic, etc. Hopefully this will also apply to you if you have any chronic health conditions or exist on a lower income scale. These books really helped me see the world from a different perspective and inspired me to change my life in a way that affected me and impacted me, that suited to my lifestyle. And they weren't gospel, this is how you live your life and this is how you should do it to become successful and this is how you should do this to become this way, etc. Does that make sense? Hopefully that ADHD ramble made sense to you on the other side of the camera. So before I get into my recommendations for the books that changed my life and how they changed my life, let's talk about today's sponsor, which is Shortform. Now, Shortform is actually really relevant to today's video because if you ever feel like there's way too much that you want to learn about, but you just don't have the time to do it, or you're one of those people like me who have books piling up on your Kindle or phone or iPad, well, today's sponsor, Shortform, is the answer for you. Shortform is the best way to dive into ideas from all those books that you have been meaning to read but haven't had the time to. Shortform gives you hyper-detailed summaries of the books that you're interested in, covering all the key points, whether that's from one-page summaries or chapter-by-chapter full guides. And also they include interactive exercises to help you remember and apply what you've learned, because that's the important thing, particularly when you're working in the self-help genre. You need to know how to apply things at the end of the day. There are a lot of self-help books that I have read, and there are some self-help books out there that I enjoyed but didn't really get too much about, but then there are certain tidbits that I wish I had remembered. Well, thankfully, thanks to Shortform, I can actually dive back into those books, get a summary of the books I've already read, and jog my memory on the things that I missed out on. Go ahead, go and do it. But it's a great way of getting a taste about what this book is about, if you got a good vibe from it, and if you actually want to hear everything this author has to say. So if you're interested, don't miss out on my deal. You can go to shortform.com/Cinzia, that's CINZIA, for a free trial and 20% discount, giving you access to thousands of book guides for the price of just a single book a month. Now, let's get into the books that changed me. Essentialism by Greg McKeown. I mean, anyone who has followed me for years will know that why this book changed my life. After reading it, I gave up all spending for a total of 3 years, which means anything on luxuries. No books, no clothes, no coffees, no alcohol, no takeout, no snacks, no events, no private transport, no plants, nothing. The only things I paid for after reading Essentialism were my bills and my weekly food shop, and that was it. And obviously the vet bills, like insurance and things like that, but you know, the essentials. So Essentialism is a mindset based on the principle of less but better. Only you can choose where to spend your resources, such as your time, energy, and money. Only you can determine what's important to you, and thanks to this book, you'll realise how few things are really actually important in the grand scheme of your life. And then you are responsible for making the trade-offs in your life if you want to make any at all. But Essentialism is a philosophical approach, which means it doesn't tell you what to give up and what not to give up. It's entirely based on you. Greg's book tells us that we can't do it all, we can't have it all, so in a world where we can only have some things, what are you going to choose? So this book really helped me identify what inspires me, what I'm good at, and what I would like to do, and how to make the world a better place, but also how to make my life a better place by eliminating everything that was non-essential from it. I interpreted that as a financial decision, but that's not even what the book is really about. You'll have to go read it if you wanted to find out what it's really about, but it will apply to you in whatever way fits where you are in your life, so that's why I recommend it. The next one is Unlearning Shame by Dr. Devon Price. Now, this is a very new book, and particularly also for me, but I think it just came out. And I got halfway through it and decided to literally go back to the beginning and start rereading it. So, because it was just so profound that I wanted to take more detailed notes about it and take, sticky notes, everything. And I know what you're thinking. I should have taken notes from the beginning. Well, I would have taken notes from the beginning, but I started reading it at night time after I trapped my right index finger in my partner's front door. And I started reading it whilst lying on the floor, phoning the NHS, waiting to be seen by the ER because we thought I'd broken it. So I just lost my fingernail. It's absolutely fine. But, that's when I started reading it. Okay, I wasn't in the mindset for taking notes. Anyway, back on to this. Aside from being trans, I'm convinced Devon Price and I are the same person. Like, we've lived the same life, because everything they have written and experienced is eerily familiar. Like, all the way down to pursuing a PhD and the reaction after the PhD. I'm seeing flash forwards. I even read parts out loud to my partner, and he joked that I'd been secretly writing this book myself, and my brain had just had a big fart and forgotten that I published this book and I had a second life. It's so similar to my life. So if you are suffering from physical and mental ailments, from a lifetime of chronic shame, one which may have, like myself, caused you to have developed life-threatening illnesses, chronic health conditions, and even put you in hospital a few times, or potentially, obliterated your life financially, professionally, academically, whatever. Shame is this virus that eats you from the inside out. And for me, oh my God, this book, I've never felt so seen or understood by an author in my entire life. This book has come out at a life-saving time for me, quite honestly. So if I had the opportunity, I would kiss Devon Price platonically and with their consent on their hand and give them the biggest, longest hug. I would in a heartbeat, because that's what their life has done to me. So Happy by Derren Brown. Yes, Derren Brown, that illusionist that you may have seen a lot if you're in Britain. He was all over the British television in the late noughties, early 2010s. Well, that guy has written genuinely one of the most philosophical, educated, well-read books on mental health and happiness that honestly I've ever read, and I don't know why more people don't talk about this. You see, obviously we take it as a given that we want to be happy, but how do we achieve happiness, and how do we even define what happiness is? So Derren Brown suggests that the answer can be found in the teachings of ancient Greek philosophers, and also there's a bit of Roman influence there with the stoicism. Brown says that by adopting philosophy based on the Stoics and the Epicureans, that we can lead a thoughtful, balanced and more well-rounded lives. Brown begins his exploration of happiness by setting pretty realistic expectations for the idea of what happiness should mean, as opposed to, much more modern self-help industry takes, which, the focus is always on goal setting or self-affirmations or, relentless and sometimes unrealistic positivity, hard working, all this kind of stuff. Whereas Brown suggests that happiness can be found by living a life in which our desires are balanced with reality that we live in. And of course, that will vary from person to person, which makes it, again, a more accessible book, in my opinion, because what our realities are reflected in the text. So if you want actually a very in-depth book about exploring the psychological and real-world implementation of branches of ancient Greek and Roman philosophy, I highly recommend this book. He knows his stuff. He really does. He's a well-read man, and it's actually beautifully written as well, so highly recommend. The next one is Mindset by Carol Dweck. Okay, so this is a bit of a famous cop-out, isn't it? Because it's one of the most famous amongst the self-help scene, but it's one I love for a reason. Dweck's research into neuroplasticity is basically unmatched. Our mindset obviously shapes our entire personality, but that means it can either help us or hinder us from reaching our potential. It dictates how we interpret successes and failures and effort, and how we approach things like academia, work, hobbies, sports, and relationships. So Dweck's science-first theory about the fixed and growth mindsets will change how you handle failure, mistakes, and bad habits. I, for one, grew up in a home where I was told that I wasn't, born intelligent. And I developed this fixed mindset from early on that I was inherently inferior and inherently thick compared to gifted children. I'm very grateful. Dweck basically obliterates the idea of the gifted child. And that really opened my eyes and helped me confront a lot of the falsities that I was raised on that resulted in, decades worth of ingrained shame and low self-esteem. So if you're someone who believes that you have a fixed personality, a fixed mindset, a fixed outcome in your life, highly, highly recommend this book. So the last book is actually a book I only just finished yesterday after filming this, but it's already in my top 5 recommendations, and it is How to Build a Healthy Brain, Reduce Stress, Anxiety and Depression, and Future-Proof Your Brain by Kimberly Wilson. Kimberly Wilson, to anyone in Britain, was on the Great British Bake Off many years ago, but is also a chartered psychologist. I've been suffering from chronic health conditions over the past year, which have been getting increasingly debilitating, and yet all my blood work has come back completely clear. I have nothing wrong with me. And amongst the, long waiting lists at the NHS, it's honestly quite exhausting. Waiting for help and waiting for answers can be exhausting and helpless. And in my quest to try and help myself further, I came across Wilson's book. And this, again, I'm heavy on science-first guides, and Wilson delivers. This is a science-first guide to brain health, and it really gave me the boost I needed to start implementing changes. Okay, so perhaps this is a very neurodiverse trait of mine, but people telling me that I should just do X just because it's good for me isn't a good enough reason to motivate me to do it. I need more information than that. People say, oh, you should do yoga more, it's good for you, or you should meditate more, it's good for you. I don't know what good for you means. Someone needs to break it down for me. I can't just base myself off it's good for me. There needs to be a deeper answer to that. And thankfully, Wilson gave it to me. Wilson finally broke down for someone like me as to the reasons, the scientific reasons that benefits from why you should eat certain foods, why you should try yoga, why you should try meditation. It's a very accessible yet science-heavy book that's filled with references to academic papers and theories, and she's really balanced at saying, this may be a thing, it may not be a thing, but here's why I'm discussing it. And she goes through a lot of things, not in a superficial depth, but she covers things like meditating, yoga, gut health, and for me, it really broke down the barriers of the superficial aesthetics associated with these things. A lot of things that are good for us, such as healthy eating, meditating, yoga, gut health, have been sort of aestheticized by social media, and for that reason, I've been repelled by it because I don't want to be associated with it. It feels a bit too just superficial and trivial, and therefore I shunned it. But thankfully, Wilson's kind of given me the kick up the bum that I needed to be like, no, actually, there is science behind this. Please don't allow superficiality to sway you from taking these things seriously. Just because I feel completely alienated from the world of the Instagrammable habits of the that girl aesthetic does not mean that I cannot implement these things for my own health and well-being. So if you're one of those people who, like me, is but I know it's good for me, doesn't make sense, she pushes past the pretense and romanticization of really healthy approaches to life and how they can benefit our brain. She gives us the science behind how our brains change and how they adopt to certain things and the theories behind them, because obviously there's no pure evidence for things like yoga and meditation, but she gives you arguments and examples of papers and experiments where they have demonstrated that's potential for benefit, and I like that a lot. I appreciate Wilson so much for writing this book and putting it into words that really penetrated my neurodiverse brain. And that's why I recommend that book to anyone who just wants to have that kind of shift physically within them, to have a healthier mindset and treat it like the organ that it is and benefit it and try and treat it and make it healthier. Particularly if you have concerns about dementia and things like that. That's also covered quite a lot in this book, so again, highly recommend. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing. Also, if you have any requests for similar videos, I have a Google form document linked in the description box down below, so you can send your requests in there. And thank you to my patrons, as always, for making this possible. And until next time, I shall see you soon for another video. And remember, be happy and healthy, and books save lives. so keep reading.